Now, I know that I could never, no matter how hard I try, adequately express my gratitude to you in words. But one thing I know for sure, when it comes to Congress and the executive branch, it is not good enough for us to just honor our veterans on Veterans Day or even at this convention. We have a moral obligation to honor you with our deeds, not just our words. And that's why I'm proud to make a bold pronouncement to you this morning. It is a new day in Congress when it comes to honoring America's veterans. It is a new day in Congress. You are no longer going to be honored with congressional speeches and dishonored with inadequate congressional budgets. By working closely with the DAV, we are working to ensure that America's veterans are treated with the dignity that you and your families deserve. These are the facts. Prior to 2007, for well over a decade, during Democratic and Republican administrations, VA budgets had left our veterans on a financial treadmill, barely keeping up with inflation, and too often falling backwards when it came to providing quality health care and benefits. The previous House Speaker, Dennis Hastert, a decent and honorable public servant, had unfortunately fired the Republican chairman of the House VA Committee, Congressman Chris Smith of New Jersey. Why? Because Congressman Smith had the courage to stand up and say that the Republican budgets at the time were inadequate to take care of the needs of our veterans. Instead of being honored, he was fired from that position and taken off completely off the VA committee. Then in 2006, Congress failed to pass a VA budget for fiscal year 2007. So the VA health care budget was frozen when the new Congress began in January of 2007. Given we were at war with Iraq and Afghan war veterans coming home in large numbers needing health care, and given high health care inflation levels, our VA hospital budgets in January of 2007 were being stretched to the breaking point. Corners were being cut in quality of care, and our veterans deserved better than that. The new Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, frankly, to many veterans, an unlikely champion for vets, had made a commitment to our VSOs several years earlier, including the DAV leadership, that if she became Speaker, veterans' health care and benefits would be the highest of priorities in the U.S. House. And by working with you, the DAV, and Senate Majority Leader Reid, Speaker Pelosi has kept that solemn commitment. Let me share with you specifically what we've done with their support since January of 2007, in less than 2 years, when I became chairman of the Appropriations Subcommittee on Military Construction and Veterans Affairs in that January. First, we passed last year, as Joe said, the largest increase in VA discretionary funding in the 77-year history of the Department of Veterans Affairs. In less than 12 months, we increased the VA budget by an unprecedented $11.8 billion. Over $10 billion of that funding went to improve health care for the 5.8 million veterans who need and deserve VA health care. For the first time in the 21-year history of the VSO's independent budget, led by the DAV, the Congress met the IB budget level for VA health care. Second, we followed up that historic budget increase last year by passing just over a week ago, as Joe referenced, to the House, my fiscal year 2009 VA funding bill, which is $4.6 billion above last year's historic level and $2.9 billion above President Bush's request for veterans for FY09. Now, let me put this in perspective. When we pass our FY 2009 VA bill, which I hope we will do next month, the new 110th Congress will have increased veterans funding by more in 2 years than previous Congresses had done in 12 years. More in 2 years than the previous Congresses had increased VA funding in 12 years. A $16.4 billion budget increase for veterans in less than 2 years. And you, the leaders of the DAV, should be proud of that historic accomplishment because you were a partner with us every single step of the way. And thank you for that. And you know what? In my book, veterans deserved every dime of that funding, and they earned every dime of that funding. In this process, I've worked hard to put together my VA funding bills in our subcommittee on a bipartisan basis, working closely with my good friend Zach Wamp, the minority ranking member, the Republican from Tennessee, who's a real champion for our vets. In fact, I guess you could say I'm a poster child of bipartisanship. I'm a Democratic House member who represents President Bush's Crawford Ranch and his father's presidential library in my district. At the same time, let me say factually that the two budget resolutions last year and this year, which made possible these unprecedented VA funding increases, reflected priorities set by the Democratic leaders in Congress. Both resolutions passed on a partisan basis, and I will show my personal bias here. But House Democrats believe that a country at war should make benefits and health care for veterans a higher priority than tax breaks for people making over $1 million a year. The third thing you and I that we have done together in the 110th Congress for Veterans is to pass the new 21st Century GI Education Bill, a great accomplishment. It is a bill that matches the benefits of one of the finest pieces of legislation ever passed by any Congress in our nation's history, the 1944 GI Bill. With these three accomplishments, I believe it is fair to say that the 110th Congress in 2007 and 2008, with the DAV as our partner, has provided a larger increase for veterans' health care and benefits than any Congress in the history of America. Now, what does this overall historic funding increase mean for America's veterans? For 5.8 million veterans needing VA health care, it means an increase of 15,000 VA health care workers, including, listen to this, 1,705 new doctors and 6,468 new nurses. That means more medical services, better care, and shorter waiting times for doctor's appointments. And for the first time since 2003, when the Bush administration placed a cap on Category 8 veterans receiving VA health care, we will increase the income eligibility level for veterans by approximately 10%. We are going to open up the doors of our VA hospitals to a lot of middle-income working veterans that need and deserve that care. It isn't right to say to veterans living in many parts of our country that if you make $30,000 a year, you're too wealthy to deserve VA health care. For Iraq and Afghan war veterans, our budgets mean everyone coming into the VA healthcare system today that is a veteran of OEF and OIF is now tested for PTSD and the non-visible forms of traumatic brain injury. For the most severely wounded OEF, OIF vets, it means a first ever polytrauma center anywhere in the southwestern United States in San Antonio. And it means modernized, improved polytrauma centers all across the country. For veterans from all wars with mental health care issues, our budgets mean $3.8 billion a year required to be spent on veterans' health care, mental health care needs. It is past time that we recognize that the mental wounds of war can often be just as serious as the physical wounds of combat.